Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Scenic View podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Owens, along with Artis Watkins, Suzanne Beasley, and Sammy Klein. The primary election has come and gone, and we have a lot to talk about. We have Scenic political strategist Flint Benson in the house to break it down for us and talk about what it means for state employees and retirees. Like I said, lots to talk about, so let's get to it. All right. So I'm not sure, Flint, if you need an introduction. I think everybody in Scenic knows you.
And Flint used to be, he's a past president of the organization.
Past president. What years was that?
2000, 2001.
Right. You're the millennial president.
That's it. He meant to start the century.
So for those that don't know him, he's our political strategist. He works with our PAC, which is MPAC, on top of his duties as a lobbyist. So he's pretty much got his hand in a lot of places, politically speaking, I guess. So Flint, just tell us a little bit about MPAC first, and we'll just go from there.
Okay, well, MPAC is made up of our scenic members throughout the state. We're divided into areas all over the state of North Carolina. Back in January, they met and decided what they wanted to do in the primary elections, and they had heard so much feedback from members, they decided there was no need to endorse in the primaries this year. So we did not have any official legislative endorsements for this race.
Okay.
So Scenic lost no races the other night.
Yeah.
If you don't endorse again.
We're undefeated.
And MPAC, just for you guys who have not heard, is EMPAC. It's the Employees Political Action Committee.
Yeah.
Always make an impact with impact.
There you go.
How many people say impact? Like
Lots of people.
I can't tell you how many different spellings we get to.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes what does the M stand for in impact? And it's basically just employee.
EM is for employee.
So it should be lowercase then.
Yeah.
So no endorsements in the primary. Is that the first time we've done that, or is that?
No, that's not unusual. We didn't even endorse in primaries until probably about 10, 12 years ago. We'd never endorsed in any primaries. So that's not out of the question for us to sit out with the primaries.
It seems maybe that's a sticky situation to endorse in a political party's primary,
Yeah, you sort of want the party to sort out their own, and then we'll look for them in the general election. So I think a lot of times for an organization like ours, that can be the best medicine. Just go ahead, let the parties sort it out. Unless you have somebody who has been very much against us as an organization, then it would be different. Or if we had somebody who had really stepped up and done some great things for the organization. But when you have no budget, it's hard to find many bright spots.
Years ago, Pat Hurley was in a very hotly contested, 4 or 5 person primary when she was running for the North Carolina House. And that was one of the ones where it makes a lot of sense for MPAC Scenic to join, to get in that race and get behind somebody who was a retired state employee and who was passionate about the issues. And
yeah, if you have a current legislator of the year or someone like that that's in a tough primary, then it's a good time to show your support for them.
No, she wasn't serving.
Yeah, she wasn't. Yeah, but if you've got somebody, like you say, that I think she had been, clerk of the court for 33 years. Mm-hmm. So you've got somebody like that you know is a good candidate. There's nothing wrong with helping them out. But for the most part, it was sort of a hard sell to help anybody out in this primary with no state budget.
Now, do you think we'll endorse in the general election?
That'll just be up to the members. Our members need to let their impact representatives know what they think about it. It could be a very precarious situation come the general election because let's say there was no budget, then you've got a case for nobody's done anything, but then you've also got the case, hey, it's time to endorse some challengers so we can get a budget next year. Now, I don't think that we'll be in that situation, but it's always a possibility. And now's the time for legislators to step up and be that legislator of the year that we can recognize at convention and we can get our people out there working for them in the general election. It may not be as much giving money this time as that we're going to put people out there at the polls working for you. If you want some helpers, help us.
This is an interesting time because we have the primary and then the short session starts next month, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to have a whole short session between the primary and the general. So people have ample time to give us love.
That's
So
right.
we can endorse, right?
Now's the time to show the love.
And talk a little bit about the process that Impact goes through to vet candidates when they do endorse.
When they do endorse, there's an interview process that candidates go through. Now, to be honest, sometimes during legislative sessions, it's hard to interview legislators. So we have been going to a lot more Zoom interviews. Sometimes you look at a race and you see that there's no way that particular legislator is going to lose because that race has been gerrymandered to the point that it doesn't matter who you run against them. So then you have to sort of make a decision as a state impact. They have to make the decision, is this incumbent the right one for us? Have they spoke up for us? Have they let our lobbyists know that they speak up for us in caucus? And a lot of times, Suzanne knows this, and artists too, being a lobbyist over there, that a lot of times you have legislators who'll come back to you and tell you, hey, Representative such and such is really speaking up for the retirees in caucus today. What have y'all done with them?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and so you have to take all that information and look at it. But there is a strict vetting process going through the interviews. Then the area has to recommend that candidate, and then it
Yeah.
goes to the state. If there's no endorsement, then the state can take over the endorsement process. But if the area endorses, we're not going to set aside that endorsement.
Yeah. So there is actually a very solid process.
Yeah, it's a
out
very
there. There's
labor-intensive
nothing-
process.
Yeah. No endorsements on a whim.
And I mean, anybody can get that endorsed. That's one thing I've got to say about Impact that I think people in North Carolina politics really do understand is true. It's up for grabs. Anybody can get that endorsement. You just have to be right on the issues for this group. And you have to, if you're an incumbent, tell them what you did, you know, and they are all ears. They're going to give everybody a fair shot. And I think that's the best thing you could say about anybody on a PAC.
To that point, Impact is a nonpartisan entity, and the folks that serve on Impact actually sign a pledge to be nonpartisan to assure that, you know, the vetting process is fair for all candidates.
Yeah.
Clint, can I get you to tell a story about way back when Patrick Ballantyne was running for governor and what a pivotal moment that was in SEANC PAC, Political Action Committee terms?
Wow, now you're asking me about when I was a member of State Impact because I was on that State Impact Committee. 2004 is when Artis is talking about Patrick Ballantyne, a state senator from Wilmington, was running against Mike Easley, the incumbent governor. And it was the first time that I knew of that a governor brought the State Impact Committee to the governor's mansion and fed us lunch, gave us lemonade. It was just a great time. And then we went back to the SEANC office, and they had their vote, and they voted to endorse Patrick Ballantyne, who was the Republican, which was the first time a Republican had been endorsed in a statewide race.
By SEANC.
Yeah, I think that got news all over the country that State Employees Association, the largest one in the country that was non-unionized, was endorsing the Republican candidate for governor.
Hell was raised from beneath the earth's surface that year. That's how big this was. It really rocked the political establishment, and people couldn't believe it. They were like, how is the State Employees Association endorsing a Republican? It was huge at the time. Now it seems like no big deal, right?
No big deal, but believe me, I still remember the vote to this day because I counted the ballots as they come across. So
Wow.
It was 8-6 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that was the beginning of our maybe nonpartisan stand? Or
we had endorsed some Republicans in the legislature before, but that was the time I think that it really sent the message loud and clear that we're open for business for both parties.
Yeah.
And again, to that point, I think it's important to point out that we are about 50-50 and have been for a very long time when we endorse. You know,
I think
sometimes people mistake,
I think in 2024, we were like 61-61
Yeah.
as far as the Democratic-Republican breakdown.
Yeah, so these folks do a good job of vetting out each party's candidates and making good decisions.
And if you're a candidate that does wrong by us, they remember that too, and they make sure that they've endorsed some opponents that they probably shouldn't have endorsed before.
Yeah.
But it was the principle of it.
At the same time, we don't have an infinite supply of money, right? And you have to be selective in who endorse because of that, right?
Yes, we have to be selective. You know, you just can't go in and the maximum contribution you can give is $6,800. to each candidate in an election, and you can't just go and give it to 170 people $6,800, even if we had that kind of money, because money is such a big part of politics now. There's no way an organization like ours can compete.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to not only make smart decisions with money, we're going to have to make smart decisions on who do we work for on election day, who do we put at the polls on election day, supporting our candidates. And we have very good luck with that because we have cards, and a lot of people will take our card when they won't take other groups because we have both Democrats and Republicans on there.
And we have volunteers. That's,
we have
when he
people.
talks about people working at the polls, this is volunteer.
Yeah.
So it's not something you have to worry about elections laws and how that can be considered.
And already we've started giving a message. Hey, November 3rd is the general election. You be ready. Don't schedule any doctor's appointments that day. Don't offer to babysit the grandkids, anything like that. We need you at the polls on November 3rd. Go ahead and mark it down.
So one more administrative type question before we dive into the
fun
election.
stuff.
Yeah. So I think it was last week or 1 week, a few episodes back, maybe Artis had mentioned that we can't really be active in federal races, right?
Right. We're not a federal PAC.
So some people will be asking, will we endorse in the Senate race or the congressional races? We don't do that.
We can, but we can't give any money.
Okay.
That's the main thing is we cannot give any money. We cannot devote any time to federal races because we're not a federal PAC.
Yeah.
And they are very strict on what you can give.
Artis, you had mentioned that you'd heard from some members that they don't think we should endorse at all in the general election, correct?
Oh, yeah. I get a ton of that. I don't know about y'all.
I get that all the time.
Because they are like, we hadn't gotten a doggone thing out of any of them.
Mm-hmm.
To heck with everybody.
And that's a very understandable position because they have been left behind.
Yeah.
Not only have been left behind, now this budget, there's no budget.
Everybody's been left behind.
And sometimes there's a little misunderstanding with where the money comes from for impact activities, too. It is not dues money. It's actually contributions outside of what they pay in dues.
Yeah.
Under law, we cannot use dues.
Exactly.
All SEANC members donating money, that's where the money comes from.
For good reason. You have to go through intensive controlling of the money and reporting of the money to be in compliance.
Yeah, I know I would not want to be a part of that whole thing when you're trying to reconcile everything with Brenda Williams-Brown, the finance department. So let's dive into Tuesday's primary elections.
Did you hear there was one in Rockingham County?
Not Rockingham, the city, from what I hear, right? So I will start out by saying, I always try to do the things stolen from other podcasts. I did listen to the Do Politics Better wrap-up of the election. So if we steal anything from y'all, I'm sorry. But
I haven't heard it yet. So
okay.
But go ahead and be a spoiler.
Okay. They did a great job. They always do a great job. So.
They do.
Yeah, sorry if I steal some of your questions.
I'm still not making a theme song for this segment.
Still no. So Senate District 26 is the main event, right?
Yeah, man, everybody knew that was at the top of the card.
That is Rockingham County and parts of Guilford County, and Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger against, I guess is he the city
sheriff?
City sheriff?
Yeah, he's sheriff.
Okay, Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page. As of right now, we still don't know the outcome. They were separated by 2 votes at the end of the night.
Isn't that wild?
2 votes. Mm-hmm. That means like if Berger's babysitter voted for Page, then
it's true. Every vote counts.
Yeah.
Here's your proof.
Wow. It won't stay like that, right? So there's provisional ballots and
there's some overseas and military ballots. Now, how many, I don't know. I'm hearing there's about 189 provisional votes, but I don't know that all of those are for that primary. Some of them could be Democrats. And then the last breakdown I heard was about 139 in Rockingham and 52 in Guilford, which that would show that it favors Page since he won Rockingham.
That's what
about 2/3 of the vote. But then you never know how many of those provisionals will be accepted because a lot of people don't understand about provisional ballots, and this may be too intense to get into, but if you go to a polling place, you cannot be denied the opportunity to vote. Even if John's from Sanford and he goes down to Wilmington, he wants to vote for a candidate down there, they have to let him vote. Now, they'll let him vote as a provisional ballot, and then once they see that you're from Sanford, that automatically disqualifies you.
Now, are they doing that with people who don't have ID at the time?
Yeah, some people,
Okay.
my understanding, they will let you vote. And what you're supposed to do is go by the Board of Elections and show them your ID.
Yeah.
I think it's by noontime Friday.
Okay.
But I think there was a little problem yesterday, and one of the Board of Elections was closed in Rockingham County.
Yeah.
The only one there, so people showing up, and there was nobody to go show their ID to.
I mean, here come the lawyers. Basically, the winner in that race is lawyers. There's getting ready to be a lot of money made.
Yeah.
Of course, there was a lot of money spent.
Oh, yeah, about $10 million just in that one state Senate race. That's unheard
So the
of.
political consultants have already gotten theirs, pollsters and all that. Here come the lawyers.
Yeah.
So will they be counting hanging chads and all that stuff?
No, at least they don't have that part, but everything else is good to go.
Yeah. Were you going to say something?
Feels very similar to a conversation. I don't remember if it was last year, but it's almost like a deja vu moment of artists saying the lawyers are always the ones winning.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a different.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's on private equity.
I
That's
mean-
on healthcare. Don't get me going.
Lawyers.
They make the laws. Who
They're
gets
the ones
paid?
winning.
So, yeah, I was going to ask, what can you glean from the situation with provisional ballots and everything? But you kind of covered that. You think that more in Rockingham would probably favor Page, right?
Yeah, and Moore and Guilford would favor Senator Berger. So
Yeah.
it just
And yet-
depends on how many are accepted at the end of the day.
Yeah. And yet, Berger is from Rockingham too, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it's just kind of a weird thing to me.
Well,
It would be a pretty interesting distance.
I actually had a Democratic legislator tell me about a year ago, and he's very popular. In fact, he has no opposition this time. And he said that he will run for the legislature for the rest of his life unless his local sheriff says he's running, then he's going to find something else because you can't be the sheriff.
That's
in
what
his
I
own
was
county.
going to say. Sheriffs are always so popular unless they're not.
Especially,
Yeah.
especially when they've won 7 times in that county as sheriff. That's tough to beat.
Yeah, we had a one in Lee County who could have gone to bigger offices, and he didn't. But yeah, they just hold a lot of trust in their county,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, people get used to the name on the ballot too. So
I always tell people don't bet against sheriffs and preachers. That's it.
yeah.
True.
So, artists, what does this mean for Senator Berger if he wins and if he loses? I guess.
I mean, in the legislature itself, people realize, like Flint just said, in your local race, if you draw somebody like a sheriff, you're going to draw a tough race. So I don't know how much it will impact him in the short session with folks in his caucus or the folks on the other side of the aisle. But you got to think it's not great to have to go through that and then try to come back and really be really tough with the House and say the Senate's not budging on X, Y, and Z. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to be tougher than because the House generally has been easier for the Senate to run over.
Mhm.
Very true.
And I don't think the House is going to feel the same way right now. They're going to be like, we'll take our chances.
Yeah, especially if he loses, right? I mean, then that's a whole nother ball game, right? I mean,
Yeah. And then you've got, I mean, in that scenario, you would have a short session where people are jockeying for
Mhm.
Yeah,
the
leadership.
leadership.
The vaccines in the caucus will be something else,
Wow.
seeing who's trying to run for that position come January, unless Senator Berger was to decide, if he is declared the loser, if he decided that he was just going to resign now,
Yeah.
which is always a possibility.
But he stayed, I mean, it seems to me so far he has stayed pretty cool, calm, and collected about, okay, this is my race and I've got to do that. But then
Yeah.
when he comes in the General Assembly, I don't think he seemed consumed by it or
Yeah.
anything.
He's been there, I think it was, I read yesterday, 25 or 26 years, right?
Yeah, 2001, I believe, is
Wow.
when he came in.
He's been there for as long as I've been alive. Quite literally.
Yeah.
It's probably somebody over there that's been there longer.
Yeah, there's a couple of Julia Howard, Mitchell, Setzer.
Mitchell Setzer.
Okay.
Forgive us if we forgot somebody else.
So I don't know if you want to do this or not, but do you have any projections or any predictions what's going to happen in this race?
That the lawyers win.
Yeah.
It's the only
It's really
prediction.
too close to even think about right now.
Yeah. Anybody that tells you, oh, I know how this is going to turn out, they're just
Yeah.
bragging about something they don't know.
What I think's interesting is that people's opinions of whether you should go back and really worry about every vote and whether it was
Yeah.
correctly cast. That debate on Twitter has been fascinating. You know, everybody pointing out, well, you tweeted this 2 years ago that was completely, the opposite of what you say now. It just shows you that in politics, eventually every scenario will hit the guy you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your opinions will be very fluid on this.
They also have the scenario that could happen is after the recounts, it's a tie and you have to have a runoff election in May. So that could be another 10 minutes.
Yeah, I saw Jerry Cohen's thing about that. if there's a
law from
recount,
1915, after the recount, you can.
if there's a tie, then you'll have another race. If you tie again in that one, then the chair of the party will pick the person that wins, and it doesn't have to be either one of those two candidates.
It could get complicated.
Yeah. That seems a little far-fetched.
I think a lot of the incumbents, though, that was a big message the other night for all of the incumbents.
There was a very anti-incumbent message in the primaries. A lot of districts did not have incumbents with opposition, but those that did, it was much tighter than they expected. In fact, Representative Reese Pirtle there in Rockingham, he probably suffered the most from an anti-incumbent vote. He went down to defeat. Well, he was in Raleigh on the House side from Rockingham County, and I feel like a lot of those people in Rockingham who went for Sam Page 2-1, also, while they were there, they voted against Reese Pirtle because he's part of Raleigh.
Well, we'll go to the other races. I know you just mentioned one. Sam, did you have a question before that?
It doesn't necessarily have to do with anything with the races. It's more of an opinion-based question. But for me personally, I'm independent, and I don't typically vote in a primary for very much for the same reason that we didn't necessarily endorse in this primary of I kind of let the parties fight it out amongst themselves, and I don't want to choose sides until I get to the general election and can just vote based on where I fall.
Is that a Gen Z thing?
I'm not sure, but I kind of wanted an opinion on people who do that. Like what you guys think of people who are like, I don't want to vote in the primary because you do have to pick.
So the
one
issue
card or the other.
is, Flint pointed this out earlier, every place is gerrymandered, okay? I don't care what legislative body it is, it's gerrymandered because everybody's going to draw the lines to create the districts to their advantage if they're in charge, whichever party's in charge. So the primary, unfortunately, in most races is the race. Most races really aren't competitive come November. So if you don't vote in the primary, to a degree, the argument is you're not voting at all because your vote doesn't matter because there are very, very few competitive. How many do you think will be competitive this November?
No more than 10, probably.
Out of 120.
And I have a personal example of that. I guess I am registered unaffiliated, which means I can vote in either primary. My race is where I live, like the Republican's going to win no matter what, right? So I voted in the Republican primary this time because I knew one of the candidates and also knew the other candidate that I didn't vote for. And I had an opinion on which one would be best.
Yeah, so you felt like you had a little bit of sway on who's going to end.
And I did pick
that one.
I did pick the winner. So.
See, if I do have strong opinions about a certain race that happens to be in a certain political party, then I'll usually be like, okay, I need to go out there and do this. But I even took a political typology quiz just for fun, and it just called me a stressed sideliner, which is true. I'm right down the center, and I'm just stressed all the time.
Well, I'll tell you what, the people who are unaffiliated are the ones with superpowers. Because it's not Republicans and Democrats that are deciding this mess anymore, in my opinion.
Well, about 91% of the unaffiliated requested a GOP ballot in Rockingham County.
Wow, really?
The unaffiliated have the power.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot.
Yeah, and they are there's more people registered unaffiliated in North Carolina than Republicans or Democrats.
I wonder if Berger pulls this out, if he changed that law where you have to. There are closed primaries where you only.
And I'll be honest with you, that's one thing that the state Republican Party at their convention, they've been having some fights over the last few years, is there is a group that wants to close their primaries.
Yeah.
Because they don't want unaffiliated deciding their candidates.
I can see value in that, though. I mean, even though I did the opposite, I can see that a party should be able to pick their candidate, and primaries weren't even like an official thing for a long time, right? It wasn't until recently.
Well, we've always had primaries, but the thing of it is the pendulum swings in North Carolina politics.
Yeah.
And for so long, when I first registered to vote in 1978, if you didn't vote Democrat in my county, you were not going to vote in the primary because there was no such thing as a Republican primary. There generally was no Republican on the November ballot.
Yeah.
Now in that same county, a Democrat has not won a partisan race there since 1998. So now we've had the same thing. If you didn't vote in the county commissioner's race on the Republican side, you won't be voting in November because those Republicans all just got elected because there's no opposition.
But I think there'd be tremendous opposition from the public to closing those primaries because those young people, and Sammy, I think you're a great example, they hate the idea of being labeled.
Yeah.
They hate, and they don't like the parties. They don't trust either political party.
But the biggest thing is people, to me, that want to advocate that we have closed primaries, what they're actually saying is we want to make sure our candidate passes the party purity test.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't give a damn about if they win the general election.
Yeah.
So
Which is so
I feel
dumb.
like you need the unaffiliateds like Sam. So have we got a good candidate for November if we've got a one of those 10 contested races in the state house?
And that's a problem on both sides. I mean, both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Party
saw that the
purity
other night.
is-
Yeah.
Like, I'll say in 2024, I voted in the primaries because I felt very strongly, especially about certain races, governor's race. So I did vote during that.
Yeah.
But this year I was like, I live in Wake County. There's a lot of things going on in Wake County all the time. And I was just like, I don't feel super strongly or feel super informed just because I don't always research as early as I should. I'll admit it. That I was like, I don't know if I should even vote in this one until general.
I mean, I think that's fair. My daughter called me and she and her friends had gone and voted for somebody that I was like, but they had really strong opinions on it. They had done their research and they really believed in what they were doing. And that's great.
Yeah.
You go do you.
Yeah. So let's move on to some of the other races that you identified, Flint, that were important to state employees. And then we'll talk a little more broadly about how this impacts state employees and retirees. In Mecklenburg County, Reverend Rodney Sadler defeated Representative Carla Cunningham pretty decisively in the Democratic primary.
Yeah, she had supported the Republican override of a veto on immigration and made some comments on the floor that I think would best be described as unfortunate because they made for a great soundbite, and she's been in trouble ever since. Also, Representative Majid in Mecklenburg County lost, and Representative Willingham over in Rocky Mount lost, and those three were part of what's called the Main Street Caucus and the Democrats in the North Carolina House. And with their losses and the loss of Michael Ray against Representative Rodney Pierce, I don't think there's any members left of the Main Street Caucus after December 31st.
Tell us what the Main Street, we call them the Main Street Ds.
The Main Street
the
Ds
importance of them.
They were a caucus that they would work with the Republican leadership, a lot of times for better projects to go to their districts, and they were not as socially liberal as probably the rest of the Democratic Party.
But what's fascinating about the Main Street Democrats to me is they started based around fiscal issues with which they believed their districts were more aligned. And yes, there were some social issues, but they really didn't say a lot about social issues.
No.
This year's when it, I know
when some of that bubbled
Representative
up.
Cunningham, when she said something about all cultures are not the same, you just kind of knew then, ooh, okay, that goes from being mainstream Democrat to that's going to play differently with people.
Yes.
And I think that's what's interesting to me is that faction that had been very much based around fiscal policy just kind of changed.
Yeah, it was basically started as a small business owners caucus, and then it evolved into other things. But now I don't think they'll have to put up with them after December 31st.
Yeah.
But that could lead to a lot of vetoes being overridden between now and December 31st, depending on how those three decide they want to vote.
I would think.
And you just mentioned Representative Ray. He was facing Representative Rodney Pierce in a rematch from 2024.
Yes.
Pierce won.
Yeah, the last time I think it was 34 votes. This time, Representative Pierce won going away. He won all three counties, including Michael Ray's home county.
Yeah.
So there was a big difference, big switch on the votes there.
But you said Ray was kind of a conservative Democrat, if you will, right?
Yeah, he was part of the Main Street Caucus.
Yeah. Now, on the Republican side, Darren Armstrong defeated House Freedom Caucus Chair Keith Kidwell, which our listeners will know from the SCOGE Committee, the House Special Committee on Government Efficiency.
Oversight and Efficiency.
Yeah.
Was he a chair of that?
He was a chair.
Yes, he was a chair of the Freedom Caucus.
Okay, so that seems like a pretty seismic loss for the Freedom Caucus. What happens to it, and just your thoughts in general?
The vice chair on that is Representative Ben Moss, and I could see Representative Moss taking that over. I think the biggest question is how many members of that caucus are actually Freedom Caucus members and how many of that caucus are just in there to keep eyes on the other ones.
Yeah.
Isn't that true of all the caucuses?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at last I heard there was like 31 or 35 members of it, but I know Representative Kidwell had been going to run for Speaker of the House and thinking that base of the Freedom Caucus would take him to the speakership, and that never worked out. And evidently it didn't work out in his primary.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on it, Artis? You seem like you have some opinions.
Oh, I mean, it makes me question something because Representative Kidwell's been very, very outspoken and upfront that his belief is government needs to run like a business. And his idea of that, in some cases, pretty clearly means he is looking to have more cuts happen in government. I'm really wondering, I have no idea. This may have had literally nothing to do with it, but it makes me wonder. So is that that's an old-timey popular thing to say, run government like a business.
I think he may have hit on something, Artis, that a lot of Republicans have not realized yet, that the rhetoric of the Republican Party from the 80s does not sell
Right.
40 years later.
And I mean, I think neither party gets it, that what we talked about earlier, young people don't trust either party. But I'm genuinely of the belief that neither party fully gets that or accepts that.
You're exactly right, because a lot of times they get bogged down in specialized issues. And I'll say for a moment that those of Sam's generation, they don't have the luxury of being concerned about some of those things because they have to be concerned about their grocery bill, where they're getting their health care from, how they're going to pay the energy bill since it's going up.
Yeah.
So if you can't focus on that, I don't think you're going to get a lot of working people and a lot of young people.
And that's why I think not having a budget really, really didn't help some of these people.
Yeah, I've heard more on this budget not being passed by our members and by other people that I'm around than I ever have any other budget that's been passed. People are like, why can't you do your job? I have to go do my job.
Yeah.
Why can't you do yours?
Yeah.
So I was just looking at his district here. He's from down near the
Beaufort,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
It's actually originally from New Jersey.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that too.
And that became part of his campaign, too, was that he's not one of us.
It doesn't matter where you live or what college you go to, you'll always find someone from New Jersey.
And his opponent is a farmer, correct?
Yeah.
And I mean, who feels more left out than farmers, except, the state employees who would hold their hand?
It was a big win for Agricultural Commissioner Steve Troxler because he went down there for the kickoff for Darren Armstrong's campaign. He was the keynote speaker, and he helped raise money for him along with Representative Jimmy Dixon from Duplin County, who's the ag chair in the House. So
Jimmy Dixon had the kind of most famous ad.
Where's the meat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where's the meat? Yes. And
So, Darren Armstrong, what do we know about him? Or have you met him or anything? Or
I have become Facebook friends with him. That's all I can tell you. Yeah, so I can stalk him for the campaign. So.
So you said he's a farmer, though. You were just mentioning Jimmy Dixon. I thought his whole situation with his election was interesting in that he was facing a woman and
husband,
not a woman.
No, I mean, he was facing.
John's like, that was interesting.
It was a husband-wife team that were running for his.
Husband was running against Senator Bretton Jackson. The wife was running against Representative Jimmy Dixon, yes.
Okay.
They had a plan.
And they had, in fact, the husband was a cast member of one of the Netflix shows. I can't remember which one.
Oh.
And the wife.
Outer Banks?
No, it wasn't anything
Stranger
that famous.
Things?
Wasn't anything that famous.
Now you're speaking Sam's language.
Yeah. Oh, Netflix. But it's a little tough to be from California and move into Duplin County. And in 3 years, you're going to take on Brett Jackson and Jimmy Dixon.
Yeah.
When ag is such a big part of Duplin County.
Well, and they've
those
been
are the two ag chairs, one in the Senate, one in the House.
forever.
And did Troxler speak out in that one?
I'm sure he didn't have to.
Because I'm telling you, if Steve Troxler speaks out, I mean, people listen. He is
the kingmaker.
He is.
Yeah.
He's the goat.
Mad respect. Mad.
And I knew Representative Kidwell was in trouble when he was criticizing Steve Troxler. And I thought, that's not going to work well.
One of the few people I knew before I started working here because I was in FFA in high school. And so we'd go to state conventions and stuff, come to Raleigh for that. We'd always hear his name.
You knew a good one.
We need more farmers running for office. It seemed like.
Love them.
But I digress.
I was going to say that's a whole other conversation.
So other races that you cited, we've already talked about Reese Pirtle, but Representative Kelly Hastings and Mark Pless also lost there.
If I was going to classify one upset, I would say the Hastings one was not one that many people saw coming, I don't think. I had put it on my primary list as one to watch. But it was, again, it's one of those things at some point, as you know, I wrote in the paper about what to watch in the primaries. At some point, as you get older, you're more susceptible to a younger person coming on the ballot and beating you.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I can really think of in Representative Hastings' case, because there's no scandal about him. There's no rhino charges or anything like that. It was just a young lady that came in. She's a recent graduate of the pharmacy school, and she was like, we've got to do something to keep family pharmacy businesses together. In fact, she's testified in front of the state health plan.
Yeah, she did.
So it'll be interesting to see how her voice is in the House. And Representative Hastings, I have to say, he was very gracious in his statement congratulating her. And
Well, he's a gentleman.
he is.
He is. And interesting, too, though, he had decided not to run.
Yeah.
And then decided he would run.
So Caroline Eason is her name?
Yes,
Yeah. And I guess we've met her, right, from the state health plan. So
just briefly.
I mean,
Just
we
brief-
watched her
Yeah.
speak, but
okay.
not really met her.
Where is that district? Gaston County, right?
Cherryville, up around that area.
Okay. Any other races that you think we need to talk about in the legislature?
Well, the Mark Pless race, I don't think that was on a lot of radars, but I knew that he had some opposition because local governments in his district were upset because he would run bills without consulting them about local matters, such as making the school board a partisan race and doing away with the tourist tax in Haywood County, I think it was. And he didn't consult them, and he sort of had a my way or the highway manner about him, is my understanding from some of the people in that area. And Jimmy Rogers was on the school board. In fact, I think he may have been the chair of the school board, and he decided to run against him, and he defeated him.
Jimmy Rogers is his name?
Yeah.
Like the country singer?
I think that helped.
Yeah, it probably would, right? My dad would vote for him.
The former wasn't Jimmy Rogers a governor of Tennessee? The one that wrote "You Are My Sunshine."
Yeah. I don't know if he was a governor, but I know he was. A singer. Okay.
Yeah, Jimmy Rogers.
I do want to touch on briefly the federal races in North Carolina, specifically the Valerie Fashee race against Nita Alam in the Durham area. It seemed like it was going to be closer than it was to me. You got any thoughts on that?
Fashee did a good job of getting it back in
her court.
Yeah, back in her court. I think especially about the time Bernie Sanders came was probably when she was at the lowest, but she ran the steady race and she got it. But I can't be very impartial on that one because Fashee was in the state house and the state senate.
Yeah.
And she's been a longtime friend of SEANC's. And on top of that, me being retired from the Department of Correction and her being a former jailer at the county level, we automatically had a connection. So
yeah.
She's a very nice lady.
I know that she's been to our convention a few times. I've seen her there. And so Nita Alam is a young
county commissioner.
Right? Yeah. I think we'll probably see more of her in the future.
Well, the only problem is this the second time she's lost in the primary to Fashee.
Okay.
So that cannot be a negative. But she is very young, and I think she probably gained a lot of points just by conceding the race and not going through recounts and lawsuits. And she, of course, the lawyers may be upset with her now because some money.
I mean, it was one of the many races around the country where AIPAC became a central theme. And the Congresswoman had accepted money from AIPAC, and then she renounced the money from
And that's
AIPAC.
sort of the problem with a lot of the races. People say, well, they accepted support from this PAC or that PAC, and you can't refuse it because you can't coordinate with it.
Yeah.
So we see that in a
Cut
lot
and dry.
we see that a lot in the legislative races. Well, he got mailers sent by such and such group. She had them from another group. Well, they're PACs. A lot of times they're out-of-state PACs, but the candidate doesn't even know they're coming until they see them in the mailbox.
I mean, even there was one race that we were involved in that was like, look, the state of the liberal union is backing my opponent,
The candidate's like, knock it off. Listen, John, I said something dreadfully inaccurate that I feel a pressing need to correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Most important thing we talked about this whole time. It wasn't Jimmy Rogers. It was governor of Tennessee.
Jimmy Davis.
It was Jimmy Davis.
Yeah.
He is the one that wrote "You Are My Sunshine." Jimmy Rogers was such a legend, and especially for people.
You got your Jimmys.
I got my Jimmy. That was unforgivable.
So many Jimmys.
Yeah.
But whatever. Back to politics.
Yeah. So in the Senate races, the two primaries for the U.S. Senate, there didn't seem to be any surprises, anything to say about that really, except we're on to the main event.
Yeah.
Main event.
How did Don Brown do? I think he was probably the primary challenger to Whatley.
Probably about like everyone expected.
Okay.
I'd said that Whatley should receive about 65% in that primary, and I think he came in at 64.
Yeah.
So close to expectations. I think what the Republicans have to be aware of is that in a semi-crowded field on the Democratic primary, even though no one was campaigning but former Governor Cooper still got 92% of the vote.
And the turnout was much higher. At the
Yes.
race, right?
So you got an enthusiasm advantage right now to Cooper. The Republicans will have to get their enthusiasm for Whatley.
No, long time to November, but they've got some work to do away with those negatives. When you get 92%, I think there's 7 other people in the.
Yeah.
I mean.
So I have a wild suggestion, or maybe not a suggestion, but just a thought. Senator Tillis has been very outspoken in recent weeks. I guess it may be too late for him to run as an independent, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think that would be crazy. I think that would just be like, anyway, I do.
Well, I mean, it brings up a whole issue, though. Senator Tillis was one of the people who ushered the Republicans into power in the legislature after well over 100 and maybe 130 years of Democrats controlling Senate and the House unchecked. And Tim Moore and Tom Tillis pretty much did that and took over. And Tom Tillis found himself years later a U.S. senator who got abandoned by his party.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's any buyer's remorse. I mean, what do you think?
I think Senator Tillis did a great job as Speaker of the House controlling his caucus. It could have been a lot worse than it was. And I think we all said that when he left, we'd be lucky if anybody could control him as well as he did. And Speaker Moore was pretty much as good as Speaker Tillis.
And Speaker Hall seems to be doing a really good job with this guy.
And so I think they have a good tradition of speakers so far, and that started with Tom Tillis. I think it'll just be very interesting to see where Tom Tillis is in 2028 and 2030.
I think they're going to want him back. I think they're going to wish he was on the ballot. I just think it was an interesting choice to me.
Well, he is. I mean, he stirred up, commentary for sure here recently.
I mean, he knows how to do politics.
He does.
As my friends Brian and Sky said.
Let me throw out a wild question.
Well, here's the thing to remember on Tom Tillis. He has been a speaker at the No Labels Party convention, too.
Oh, that's right.
So that's the third party. Yeah. So, I know Pat McCrory had a brief flirtation with him, but is Tom Tillis in that for the long haul? Something to watch for.
Would Tom Tillis have a better chance against Cooper than Whatley?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it would be. Yeah, that would be a nail biter.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Because they both are really, really gifted politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I say that not in a pejorative way. I mean, they really know how to speak to people and
well known.
Yeah.
And neither one of them's ever lost an election.
You can't argue with that.
That was like the main event we didn't get, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, neither one is kind of attached in people's minds with anyone else. They're really their own person with everybody. I do think Whatley has an uphill climb in terms of with the independents or the unaffiliated, whatever we want to call them today. Because in so many people's minds, the only thing they really know of him is Trump.
Yeah.
And that can be great for him with some voters, and it can be challenging.
Kind of comes back to what we just talked about. It would be great for him in a primary, but not great in general. And also, we talked about there's an anti-incumbent mentality right now. So anyway, that was my side on the federal races. Like I said, we don't really get into those.
It'll be interesting to see if the anti-incumbency movement lasts until November.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank heavens we have more than we can say grace over to deal with just at the state level because, it is going to be an interesting short session.
Yes.
And,
I'm
hoping everybody realizes they need to get to working.
I think that's where we need to kind of wrap up with just how will the results of these races in the primary affect state employee and retiree raises and COLAs in the short session and then beyond?
I think it'll be interesting to see because some of the people that won't be coming back next session, I don't know, those Main Street D's thing.
Is it going to be chaos? Or
there's always a possibility of chaos on Jones Street.
I was going to say, when is it not? You can look around that building and find chaos at any given moment. So
let's say, like, if Berger loses, is it going to be pure chaos?
Oh,
Because you've already said there's going to be a lot of jockeying for position, right?
I mean, I think we're still going to see that even if he wins. There's going to be shift,
yeah.
in the power structure. So.
I mean, the soul of the Senate will be defined by whoever would win that power struggle. Their ideology.
So that absolutely will
would be
an
the
effect.
future.
Do you think we'll get a budget in the short session still?
I think we'll get at least one budget in the short session.
Yeah.
Okay.
It depends on who you talk to. I mean, it depends on who you ask on what day.
If I'm advising it, if I'm a political advisor for anybody in the House or Senate, you dadgum Skippy better get a budget done. And I mean, a good one.
And it better be big.
Figure it out. I mean, because
it just seems so crazy that they wouldn't with the general coming. So
with the general election, I think they have to do a budget. That may not start until July 1st. And so that means that the last year has just magically disappeared.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to have one. And I think the biggest thing to watch for on the budget is if there are raises for employees, if there's COLAs or bonuses for the retirees. Don't just think, we got a 5% raise. No, you actually got 2.5 and 2.5 because this is going to be for the last 2 years since you didn't get anything.
Yeah.
Don't fall for the tricks.
And I think politics as usual might be over.
Yeah.
I don't know what they'll do exactly, but this whole it's an election year, here's 1 or 2%. It just seems like the public has shifted. And state employee issues are kind of caught up in that to where I don't think it's flying anymore because state employee jobs are not just something to give to somebody. They're providing the services people pay for.
Yeah.
And I think people inherently know their state doesn't look like it used to in terms of services, roads, universities, none of it.
I mean, we pounded for years on that drum for DMV, and now that something finally has happened, that looks different. But that's the level of services. I mean, businesses are not going to want to come here. If you're not providing good services, and DMV was a perfect example.
Yeah, I had someone call me last night. They just got off at the prison, got over 200 inmates at the prison, and they've had to shut some buildings down. But yesterday they had 1 lieutenant and 3 sergeants working. They had no correctional officers.
That's crazy.
Right. And even if you go to the private sector, being number one for business doesn't seem to be translating into number one for people in terms of their jobs. Like, it doesn't look like North Carolinians are higher on the hog because of these couple years we've been number one for business.
Yeah, people are struggling.
Yeah, so it's an odd thing, but people feel that, I think, that it doesn't make sense.
So when you put that sentiment of anti-incumbent and the kind of change that you were just talking about with people realizing they need state government, they need state employees, and the vacancy issues. What does that mean for, things like the DOGE effort or the SCOGE effort?
I don't think that's working. I mean, if I was outside of SEANC, literally, if I was a political advisor for those folks, that mess isn't playing right now.
What about
people
the DAVE Act people and the lapse salary survey?
I don't think that even played in committee.
I don't think the average North Carolinian right now has the luxury of worrying about vacant positions.
Yeah.
They're too concerned with how can I pay for groceries? How can I pay for health care? How can I pay
They're not
pay for
taking
that
the bait. They're not taking the bait. People are not taking the bait that it's state employees that are reason they're not living better.
Yeah, and they actually realize that they need those states.
They know
need
it's,
the service.
It's the gazillionaires that can get free private school tuition, or not free, but partially free private school tuition. It is not the DOT worker that is keeping them from living high on the hog. They ain't buying it.
That's it.
Well, good episode, you guys. We'll be sure to come back together, I guess, around September to talk about the general election. We'll give you, but you can come back anytime. I'm not saying you can't, Flint, but I think we need to do this again around when the general starts heating up, just kind of as a primer. I wanted you briefly to talk about, you can take as long as you want to, actually. Suzanne, talk about the lobby day we have.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's put a plug in for a lobby day. May 6th, SEANC is going to have a lobby day. Please go to our website and register to be part of that. Come and join us. Your voice is the most powerful tool that we have when we're advocating. And there's, SEANC is not just this team sitting at this table. SEANC is every member So, help us have a good turnout. Come and talk to your lawmakers. Tell them your stories. They need to hear that. We'll be there to help you get around the building. But we're looking for a pretty good turnout that day, and hopefully it'll be pretty weather. May 6th.
Yeah, and we put a link in our weekly email, The Scoop, last week asking people to RSVP, and it'll be in this week's too. Just find it and let us know you can come. And if you can't come, you can submit a video. But we actually got pretty good response from that. So we've gotten several people already signed up for the event. So I think we'll...
And I like the registration. There's a place where you can write some notes about what it is that's important to you.
Yeah.
So those have been interesting as staff to see what people are going to bring to Lobby Day, what's at the forefront of their thinking.
Let me guess what the number one is. The pay raises, right?
That and a cola.
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't get threatened with cops again.
Oh, yeah. The last
Well, and the funny thing is our lobby days, we haven't done a lobby day in years that's formal like this. But when we do have people come down, it's not one of those we're out there with pitchforks kind of thing. It's to seriously let constituents talk to their lawmakers and let them hear. Because, I can see if I was a lawmaker thinking, the lobbyists, we're all,
they see us all the time.
You're paid voices. But to hear from their actual constituents, let's hope.
It could be very exciting. So please join us on May 6th.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a Gen Z moment to talk about this week?
I did some research, but there's the main thing that my generation is talking about right now is still Epstein files, war.
Iran.
Yeah.
Punch the monkey. What happened to Punch the monkey, by the way?
He's doing better. He has a favorite zookeeper who, if you see videos, every single time this one zookeeper walks in, immediately jumps and clings on to him.
And I think I read that person, too, has been working like extra hours.
Yeah. And he has a TikTok because it has popped up on my TikTok, and he shares information about some of the other animals. They just recently found a baby otter that was like stranded in the middle of nowhere, and he's now the key person for that baby otter as well, basically, and is spending a lot of time getting him socialized.
Punch the monkey could win this U.S. Senate primary.
Honestly,
he is beloved.
He could. There's still people. I mean, he's got more friends. He has a brother now. And there's videos of his little brother or his big brother coming in and protecting him when he gets bullied. And he basically has two moms because he's still got his orangutan. It got super muddy one day, and they tried to give him a new stuffed orangutan, and he was like, "I don't want that one.
Having it.
Don't want that one." So he still has his little orangutan with him, but it's funny because his favorite zookeeper will come in there, and then he'll like try and get him off of him and be like, "You got to stay in here," and then they just give up and they're like, "All right, we're taking you into the room with us."
So there's your warm fuzzies after a week of politics.
Yeah. Punch the monkey. Still cute.
Okay, question of the week.
John's wacky weird question of the week.
Okay, so the question of the week, it's been kind of a strain to find one this week. I don't know why, but it just didn't come to me right off. But I want to know your favorite political memory activity that you've ever been involved in. And I will start. Mine is pretty ridiculous. I ran for vice president of my high school.
I love it.
When I was like, I guess I was junior in high school. And I wrote my speech, and it was like really negative towards towards other people. And I can't believe I wrote it now looking back. And it was really not a good experience.
Did you win?
I did win. I can't remember what I promised, but it was just way out there. I don't think
cafeteria.
I don't think my frontal lobe was attached.
Oh no.
I was like 16 then. But I always remember that afterwards, a teacher came up to me and was like very upset. She was very mad that I was talking about the other candidates.
Your first,
and that was like
politics.
My first soiree into politics. So,
well, I mean, everything. 24 years with SEANC now. Everything in my grown-up life basically has, revolved around politics. But at this moment, always sticks in my head former Representative Wilma Sherrill. She passed not too long ago.
Yeah.
God bless her. It was my first year lobbying. And I believe, if I remember correctly, we had endorsed her opponent. She won. And it was one of those, 2:00 in the morning, we're still at the legislature trying to hammer out a budget. And she was punchy. I was punchy. She yelled at me. I yelled at her. And
back in the days when it was fun.
yeah, it's when you could. And then you
Yeah.
sit down and talk. But she ended up being one of my favorite people over there. And she would tell me things. She would share things with me, tell me where to go, who to talk to. So yeah, just a fond memory.
And nowadays, that would have been on Twitter like within an hour.
Mhm.
Scenic lobbyists fighting.
It was good though.
It would have, and that's sad because by the end of it,
Yeah,
they
it
really
was-
were. And literally, I'm just like, leave me out of it.
That's
Because,
Yeah.
yeah,
It
Representative Cheryl
still
was
would have
like,
been
And a lot-
She was like, "Come get your girl."
she said, you need to control her. And I was like, yeah, well, that ain't happening. But
And a lot of times, as a lobbyist, people that you start out on the wrong foot with
Oh,
do
yeah.
become
Yeah,
some of your best friends over
Yeah.
there. It's-
she liked my spunk. Yeah.
What about you, Flint? You got stories. Heard some of them.
yeah, I could do several scenic ones, but probably since he just recently passed away, when I was working in D.C., Jesse Jackson was at the reception, and he was with a group that I knew, and he came up to me, and I introduced myself. He said, "I understand you do great impressions of me and Bill Clinton. Which one are you going to do tonight?"
now you know you got to do one.
Well,
Don't
I
do
just,
Jesse. That one-
well, I just looked at him and I said, "Well, Jesse, I know Hillary's going to hate that she couldn't be here tonight."
Oh,
my
goodness.
Bill, by the way. Anyway, at the hearing he had last week, he was a rock star still.
Yeah.
Yeah, he held the crowd even at that. But
Well, I used to have real fun with the scenic hotline because, well, I knew nobody was listening anyway, because I don't think anybody ever called it. But I have done scenic hotlines before. One time I did a Bill Clinton one time I did a Jesse
Yep.
Jackson one time I did a Tony Rand. And,
nice.
I mean, look, we've used the lyrics from Prince songs
Yeah.
when talking to people. It's it's all what you make it.
All right, who wants to go next? One of y'all.
I don't really have one. I've only been in politics for 3 years, 4 years, going on 4.
Well, maybe yours is the time you got the police called on you at the legislature.
Yeah, pretty
That would be one.
Go back to artists. She's got. She's
I mean,
got more
I
things
can't
to
think
choose
of
from.
just one story. There's been so
There's
much.
so many.
Goodness. I do think one of the moments that stuck with me as profound was when Linda Coleman, who was a scenic hero, she was in the House. She stood up to the Democrats were in charge of the House. And so she was a freshman, and she stood up to the Democratic leadership and said the budget does not do right by state employees and retirees. My district has a lot of them, and I'm standing up for the people in my district. She held up the whole budget.
She did.
And man, she was beaten up over that, not physically, but like verbally beaten up over that. We were verbally beaten up
Yeah.
over that because they said,
It's all y'all.
I won't say who, he's not alive anymore, so it's fine, but still, somebody super powerful at the time said, you need to release Linda Coleman to vote for the budget. And I started laughing. I'm like, we don't, quote, have Linda Coleman. The problem for you is you don't either. Her voters have her. Her constituents have her. But I remember being struck by just how committed. Honestly, her husband was alive at the time, and she said, I would rather go home and spend time with my husband than I would sit in this chair and not stand for
Yeah.
anything on issues. And I just thought I had never seen it before.
She was so
That-
genuine.
so to this day, I will always have love for Linda Coleman.
The one I was considering talking about actually involves her too, because when I first came to work at Scenic, I didn't really work in politics. I was a journalist on the other side, but the first time I ever really worked in politics was on her campaign when I think it was 2012, and it was the one with the recount. So
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
2012.
Well, they
Yeah.
didn't end up. She ended up
she didn't
asking
ask
that
for
they did not. Now remember, 5.5 million votes were cast in that particular election for lieutenant governor. She lost by less than 10,000.
Yeah.
So people were pushing her with full force. You need to make sure. I mean, when it's less than 10,000 out of 5.5 million votes, you got to make sure.
Yeah.
But she said she really felt like it was time to move on and not cause any more consternation or fracturing that also was really, I mean, I just think she's a stand-up person.
She is.
Yeah.
Don't see that.
Well, that's where we'll leave it. And enjoy the rest of your week. And be sure to come out on May 6th.